If folks are ready, I'm going to go ahead and call this Monday, April 3rd meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks for everyone for attending in person. We also are meeting in hybrid version via Microsoft Teams, so welcome to those that are participating remotely. I do have one change to the agenda, and that would be item 7C has been postponed to the April 20th meeting. Rule this evening, there shall be no updates on the NCAA championship game, because I am originally from Connecticut, so no scores, please. With that said, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would ask Luke Walrath to lead us this evening. Thank you very much, Luke. We'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, and that's our annual review and consideration of approval of the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau marketing plan and budgeting for fiscal year 2024. And this evening we have Rhonda with the CVB to present to the public and the council. Rhonda, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Mayor Mulfeld, City Council, and City staff, thank you for your time and for your service to our community. I'm Rhonda Fitzgerald, as Mayor Mulfeld said. I live on Lupfer Avenue, and I'm here tonight to present the annual plan for the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau. Normally our board chair, Mariah Nelson Juice, would be here, but she's out of town on spring break, so I'm pinch hitting for her. We would request that the City Council approve our FY24 annual plan and public bed tax portion of the budget this evening after we've finished our presentation. For your reference, the annual plan and budget can be found on page 43 of your packet. State law requires this approval in order for Whitefish to receive its annual share from the lodging facility use tax, also known as the bed tax, and we'll put my presentation up on the screen now. First, I'd like to introduce the members of the Board of Directors. We're very fortunate to have such an engaged and passionate group of business people who live, work, and own or operate businesses here in town. Our chair is Mariah Nelson Juice of Nelson's Hardware, and she represents retail businesses. Jessie Farnes from Montana Coffee Traders is our vice chair, and she represents both restaurant and retail businesses. Thank you, Jessie. I'm the secretary treasurer. I'm from the Garden Wall Inn, and I represent small lodging properties. Erica Terrell, the marketing director for Glacier Restaurant Group, represents restaurant and bar. Edna White of Averill Hospitality represents large lodging properties. Lauren Osolowski owns Spotted Bear Spirits and represents distilleries and bars. Matt Gebbo is the marketing director at Whitefish Mountain Resort. Kimberly Wortman is our transportation representative. She's from the Big Mountain Commercial Association, AKA the Snow Bus. Thank you, Kim.
We saw you.
And Maggie Schwenker, also from Montana Coffee Traders, she's their wholesale coordinator there. And we have our extremely talented staff members, including Marketing Director Dan Hansen and Business Manager Luke Walrath. Thank you, Luke. Our board and staff work closely with our agencies of record, including Brian Schott, who is our contracted public relations agency. Thank you, Brian. And with DVA Advertising, based in Bend, Oregon, which is our contracted creative agency. We recently completed a search for an executive director after our former director, Dylan Boyle, accepted a new position in Bellingham, Washington. Our new executive director, whose first day, I'm not kidding you, was actually today, is here with us tonight, and I'm quite honored to have this opportunity to introduce Julie Mullins to you. Julie possesses a wealth of tourism industry knowledge, which she is bringing to our work of balancing destination stewardship and protecting the livability of our community, all while enabling our local businesses to achieve long-term economic sustainability. Julie's passionate about maintaining and preserving our community's culture. So with that, please join us in welcoming Julie. Michelle, do you want to progress the slide for me? Oh, you did. Okay, to give a little history, The Whitefish Convention and Visitor Bureau, also known as Explore Whitefish, is a member organization of approximately 130 businesses located in Whitefish. Its creation was necessary for Whitefish to receive a portion of the 4% of bed tax dollars collected in the city of Whitefish. Without this group, any funds allocated to Whitefish would be spent by Glacier Country Regional Tourism instead of by Whitefish. The state of Montana has a specific set of regulations as to how these monies are spent. I'm going to start with some history and background on the lodging facility tax and the CVB, followed by a short review of the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan and how the CVB has integrated the findings from the plan into the mission and vision of the organization. Then I'll walk through the lodging facility use tax budget, the bed tax budget, for the upcoming FY24 fiscal year and how budget items are directly related to action items identified in the city's Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. In Montana, all lodging properties collect 8% lodging taxes from overnight guests. The 8% is divided, with 1/2, or 4%, going into the general fund. This is the lodging sales tax. The other 4%, called the lodging facility use tax, is directed to be used for tourism marketing and film promotion. This 4% tax is commonly known as the bed tax. It was enacted in 1987. The bed tax legislation created the structure of the State Tourism Office, currently known as Brand Montana, as well as 6 tourism regions in the state. We're located within the Glacier Country Tourism Region, which extends across northwest Montana. Once a community reaches a specified threshold of bed tax collections, they are allowed to apply for some of those funds to be returned to the community, to be reinvested through a Convention and Visitors Bureau. Currently, there are 18 Convention and Visitors Bureaus recognized in Montana. The map you have only has 17 of them because Columbia Falls, the newest, is just now becoming recognized, and it's not on the map yet, but going forward, Columbia Falls will have a Convention and Visitors Bureau, as does, of course, Kalispell. The WCVB started receiving Whitefish's bed tax funds in 1998 as an all-volunteer organization. In 2006, the WCVB board became a standing committee of the city of Whitefish. Slide 4. There's a statutory appropriation for how the 4% lodging facility use tax funds are distributed. This shows the current distribution, although the legislature has some bills to change it. They so far don't address our portion, but they definitely are addressing the Office of Tourism's portion, Brand Montana, that biggest piece of the pie. So it remains to be seen what will evolve from that. Approximately 22% of the 4% bed tax is distributed to the regions. If a community has a Convention and Visitors Bureau, then 1/2 of that 22% of the 4%, or 11% of the total tax collected, of the total tax collected within the city limits, comes back to the CVB, while the remaining 11% goes to the Regional Tourism Commission. In our case, Glacier Country Regional Tourism. Last year in Whitefish, $2.4 million was collected as the 4% tax. Another $2.4 million was collected that went straight into the general fund. Do not pass go. So of the $2.4 million, we get 11%, which is projected for this coming year to be $267,000. That's the return to the Whitefish CVB, and that's the figure that's reflected in the budget we're presenting to you tonight. 60% of the bed tax funds currently go to the State Tourism Office, and 22% go to the regions, but there are many other partners who benefit, including state parks, tribal tourism, the Institute for Tourism and Recreation Research at the U of M, the Historic Society, the Heritage Commission, and a program for aquatic invasive species. They're all coming out of that pie there. Next slide. During FY22, statewide collections of the 4% bed tax totaled $56.2 million. As you can see, our region in northwest Montana generates 1/3 of the total state bed tax collections. Yellowstone is a little over 1/3, and the other 1/3 is divided up between the other 4 regions. Most communities across Montana have enacted a tourism business improvement district, which assesses an additional tax on hotel rooms in order to effectively carry out the operations of their nonprofit organizations. This is not voluntary, it is a mandatory tax. The Tourism Business Improvement District boards are made up only of member lodging businesses, and they direct the use of the funds. Typically, their metric for success is, quote, heads in beds, regardless of season and of how that may affect the surrounding community. Our funding model is unique. Rather than a tourism business improvement district, our board, made up of a cross-section of member businesses in our town, is dedicated to the long-term viability and livability of the community we all call home. In Whitefish, we have chosen our Community Sustainability Fund rather than a tourism BID. The Community Sustainability Fund is voluntary. Member lodging properties and restaurants choose to add a voluntary assessment on their receipts. Businesses choose to collect the CSF, unlike a mandatory Tourism Business Improvement District tax. Guests can voluntarily have the CSF removed if they wish. Our CSF model allows us to systematically develop a single action plan with a broad and diversified approach to our plan and budget, which reflects the community's vision, as articulated in the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. The CVB has integrated the findings from the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan into the mission and vision of the organization. 6th slide. This kind of shows the process for arriving at the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. The committee was tasked with developing a joint tourism master plan between the city and the WCVB, integrating extensive public input and providing a strategic long-term vision and framework for the sustainable future of the Whitefish tourism economy. The plan was approved by the Whitefish City Council in September 2020 with the key pillars of community engagement, community character, and livability. It's important to note that the WCVB board had the foresight to look toward the future in bringing this idea to the Whitefish City Council almost 6 years ago, and we have integrated the plan into everything our organization does. For Explore Whitefish to effectively and strategically achieve our identified destination stewardship goals and findings from the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan, the organization needed the ability to set aside funds to support these goals. First, Explore Whitefish formalized an updated mission and vision to accurately reflect the new direction of the organization. Next slide. The mission, fostering sustainable tourism through inspiration, education, and partnerships to enhance, protect, and preserve our viable year-round community. The vision, achieving long-term economic and community sustainability through steadfast destination stewardship. The definition of sustainability is to balance the economic vitality, businesses open and employed year-round, while protecting character, livability, and the environment. We'll achieve this through inspiration, education, and partnerships. Fortunately, the state rules and procedures for the allowable lodging facility use tax, bed tax, expenditures were updated last year in order to allow for more local investment of the funds in addition to destination marketing. These changes allowed us to diversify the annual budget across destination stewardship and destination marketing to work toward the goal of sustainable tourism. To review some of the high priority items identified in the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan and how the fiscal year 24 public budget and annual plan strategy addresses them is on slide 8. The first one, education and outreach. Explore Whitefish engages in various methods of outreach and support, including the Be a Friend of the Fish campaign. During the summer of 2021, and again during the extended warm season of 2022, Explore Whitefish executed a peak summer season outreach campaign called Be a Friend of the Fish. Slide 10. This on-the-ground visitor education campaign, firmly rooted in community values and informed by the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. The campaign sought to reach visitors and residents in a number of ways, including banners hung downtown, Explore Whitefish website, rat cards, newspaper, online ads, streaming music, social media, visitor kiosks, print travel guides, and at the visitor center. To gauge the effectiveness of the campaign, we contracted with the Institute for Tourism Research at the U of M to survey visitors and residents. Next slide. The survey results show that there's room for increased awareness and points to ways to achieve that. We plan to expand and adjust this campaign during the FY24 warm season, applying the knowledge we gained from the survey last year. Explore Whitefish seeks to create lasting impacts with local partnerships and national platforms. Some of the learnings from the survey there are up on that slide, and they're pretty interesting. I think people always like to think they are exhibiting behaviors. It's kind of wishful thinking, but overall, 86% agreed or strongly agreed that the 6 Friend of the Fish principles have a positive impact on whitefish. The most agreement was with full-time residents. Visitors agreed next, and part-time residents agreed the least. We didn't have a large sample of part-time residents, but it was sort of surprising. Overall, 71% of residents and 53% of visitors said they always strive to adhere to the principles. So let's hope. Of the 6 principles, Recreate Responsibly had the highest awareness, and I think that's because that's a national campaign that's been on for quite a long time now, so people were quite aware of that. For visitors, the highest awareness was be a steward of the land. Similar reasons, I think. For part-time residents and visitors, the lowest awareness message was slow down. So we're going to work on that. Next slide, please. Under strategic partnerships, Explore Whitefish seeks to create lasting impacts with local partnerships and national platforms. Building these partnerships has a direct impact on community sustainability, and here are some examples. Protect Our Winters is a national group of athletes, scientists, creatives, and business leaders, including Patagonia, Fat Tire, and REI, for instance, who live and who are working to help passionate outdoor people protect the places they live and love from climate change. Explore Whitefish and Whitefish Mountain Resort partnered up to become supporters of Protect Our Winters, and we are the first town and mountain collaboration to become partners, and the Protect Our Winters people are really excited about that idea. There are a lot of ski resorts that are partners, but the idea of a town and a ski resort collaborating to be partners is a whole step forward, and we're pretty proud of that. And we had a trailer to show you, because this is a really cool video, but apparently we can't play it, right? Okay. Well, I do urge you to go online and on YouTube and watch it, because it's really excellent.
It just won't stream, Rhonda.
Yeah,
so,
I understand. Yep. It's the best part of the presentation. Okay, so the next slide, please. Housing Whitefish. Want to help create homes that people can afford? Explore Whitefish recognizes that one of the biggest challenges facing whitefish is affordable housing. During fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, Explore Whitefish began a financial partnership with Housing Whitefish in order to help tackle this issue, and we have plans to continue the partnership for this next fiscal year. Leave No Trace is ensuring a sustainable planet for the outdoors. Leave No Trace is a national and international effort providing programs, education, training, and outreach. They use the power of science, education for all, and stewardship to support and protect nature. Pledge for the Wild. Explore Whitefish has partnered with Whitefish Legacy Partners and the national platform Pledge for the Wild to proactively share responsible recreation tips while creating a direct channel for visitors to give back to local trail maintenance through online donation or text to donate. Next slide. Those are examples of some of the programs that we're working on and will continue to work on. Explore Whitefish seeks to invest in local infrastructure which is beneficial to visitors and the local community. This allowable expenditure for bed tax funds was new for fiscal year 23. Explore Whitefish has identified local infrastructure projects, including updates and maintenance to the downtown Wi-Fi network, which we established in FY19, visitor information kiosks, webcams, and the wayfinding system. In addition, there are plenty of potential projects which will be vetted during FY24, such as facilitating long-term solutions to biped connectivity in the downtown core. John smiles. Business community investment in bear-proof trash containers for businesses, and enhancements to the snow bus stops or transportation center. Up to but not exceeding 35% of the organization's annual budget of bed tax funds may be designated for these projects, and we've maxed that. You'll see in our budget we have the full 35% that's allowable designated for these types of projects. We'll assess the community's needs to enhance the visitor experience, and all projects must have Explore Whitefish Board approval. The amenities must be owned by a qualifying government entity, tribal government, or nonprofit organization, and the funds are not to be used for major construction, utilities, or underground infrastructure. Next slide, please. To develop our annual plan and then budget for it, we utilize several sources for research. Next slide. Smith Travel is a hotel reporting platform with hotels submit their occupancy and average daily rate, and then Smith Travel puts that all together and we purchase that data. It gives us traditional lodging metrics. AirDNA does the same thing with Airbnb and VRBO. Not any of the other platforms, but those two. And so by purchasing AirDNA data, we can compare short-term rentals and traditional lodging and see what's happening in our community. Meltwater is for journalism, it collects and reports articles that have occurred. And that's how we follow our crisis communication partnership and other public relations efforts. VisaView is the Visa card, and they will sell us data which tells us how much purchasing was done in our community with Visa cards. And it gives us resident spending as well as visitor spending. And Visa projects that they get about 60% of the total credit card spend in a community. So you can just take their numbers and say, okay, that's 60, so 100%, which would include Amex, and MasterCard would be X. That doesn't usually include lodging because most people purchase their lodging before they arrive, but it shows a lot of on-the-ground expenditure. So you get bar, restaurant, shopping, gas, groceries, activities, guides, rental, equipment rental, all of that will show up on a Visa card, and so this is very valuable data for us to tell what kind of economic impact different visitors have. We know where they came from and how much they spent. It's pretty interesting. Sprout Social is how we monitor our social media results. And Institute for Tourism and Recreation Research is at the University of Montana. That is the statewide visitor data pot of gold. Almost anything you want to know you can get from ITRR. They have visitor characteristics, resident attitudes, visitor spending, resident spending, all kinds of reports. And you can spend your life in their interactive website if you want, but we really use it a lot. Examples of our research finding. Next slide. So this shows 2019, which we use 2019 as kind of baseline because 2020 and 2021 were really weird. And so when we try to compare, we go back to 2019, which was a much more normal year. And this shows you the occupancy wave in Whitefish, the high seasons and low seasons. And you'll see that winter and fall are definitely times when we can, businesses are looking for customers. December kicks up, and then the summer, July, August, September is the peak season. And this also shows you that traditional lodging, the blue line, in 2019 had 1,200 rooms in Whitefish. Short-term rentals in the city limits had 711 rooms. They typically have 2.3 rooms per unit. And in the zip code short-term rentals had 2,111 rooms. The zip code rooms average 2.6 rooms per unit. So you get a much higher number. So as you can see, in 2019, we had a very disproportionate representation of occupancy in short-term rentals compared to traditional lodging. Next slide. This is 2022. Short-term rentals both in the city and in the zip code have surpassed traditional lodging in some months, most months. And they have increased disproportionately. In the city, short-term rentals are now 1,200 rooms, which is the same number as traditional lodging. And in the zip code, it's 3,299 rooms. The city number is in the zip code number. So you've got 1,200 traditional rooms and 3,300 short-term rental rooms in Whitefish. Next slide. And those are the occupancies. Those aren't empty, those rooms in the peak season. This is a comparison of 2019 and 2022 of traditional and short-term rentals. And you can see that tremendous growth there in short-term rentals in 2022 and no increase in traditional lodging. Next slide. In calendar year 2022, so that was till December, this recent December, lodging occupancy year-round average was 58% in Whitefish for traditional lodging, which was a 2% increase over the year before. Short-term rentals in the city limits had a 57%, almost 58% lodging occupancy, and that's a 40% increase. And zip code short-term rentals had an average occupancy of 55.7%, and that's a 7% increase. So the big increase is happening in the city limits. Next slide. This is the Visa View credit card spending for 2019, I think. I can't read it. Yeah, 2019. So on the left is the visitor spending, and that dark wedge is international, which you can assume is mostly Canadian. On the right, the blue and brown are visitor, and the orange is resident Visa card spending for the year. And as you can see, they're almost even, 50-50. Now, the next slide. This shows 2022. So on the left is the visitor spending, which actually went down a bit in total dollars. And on the right side is resident spending versus visitor spending. And resident spending has gone up a lot. And we think that that's primarily new residents. You know, there's rate increase, of course, but the visitor spending is flat or actually down a bit, but the resident spending has gone up significantly, and there's been a significant increase in the total, but it's entirely made up of residents. And by resident, we say Flathead area. So Kalispell, Columbia Falls, Big Fork would be counted as resident for this purpose. Excuse me. Next slide.
Rhonda, just a FYI, you're at about 28 minutes.
Oh gosh.
And you're on slide 23 of 35.
I'm done.
So, no, you can breeze through these, but just, we do have other agenda items.
Okay.
With all due respect.
So in order to receive the funds that we are presenting to you tonight, we go through a 5-month process. We start in January, and it will be finalized in June at the Tourism Advisory Council. When projecting the budget, we take into consideration many sources, which I've just shown you some of. We monitor the collections closely because we sometimes have to adjust as we go along, but this is our best guess at this moment for what we can predict. We've provided the overall percentage items in each budget line item in the public budget to visually show the diversified strategy for the upcoming year as we continue to push forward with our destination stewardship efforts. Could you click, Michelle? Let's go past that one. There you go. That's how we're splitting the public budget visually. Product development is that 35%. Education and outreach is Friend of the Fish, and crisis communication, I think it's in there. And that's the budget we've presented to you tonight. And that brings it to a close. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Once again, I'm here to request that the City Council approve the CVB FY24 marketing plan and public lodging tax budget of $267,000. Next slide. Thank you for your partnership that we have long enjoyed with the City of Whitefish. We appreciate your time today and look forward to working with you into the future. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Rhonda. Great presentation, as usual.
The other slides are just in case you ask questions about specific things.
Great. Can the entire presentation be forwarded to Michelle? It already is? Okay. Great. Thank you. I have a few comments before we go to questions. I'd like to welcome Julie. We look forward very much to collaborating with you on our mutual goals. We've always held a strong partnership, one built in respect and trust between the two organizations. So look forward to carrying that on as well. I was glad to see the Main Street Montana pillars are still embedded in your marketing plan for FY24. Of course, those were developed under former Governor Bullock. So I'm glad to see those are still resonating throughout the plan and helping drive the action items. What was very interesting is the polling of visitors and residents regarding whether or not they agree or support the Friend of the Fish principles at 53% and 71% plus or minus. And I think that would be really interesting data to collect again in future years to look at trends among the sentiment between visitors.
We are planning to
and
repeat the
residents.
survey.
That was really good stuff. So thank you for presenting that. I do have two questions, if you don't mind, then I'll turn it over to the council. I didn't see, and I'm sure that's because it's in the private portion of the budget, you did mention, as in past fiscal years 22 and 23, supporting affordable workforce housing initiatives here in town. Can you speak to that just very generally in terms of what percentage of that private public budget is going towards affordable housing, please?
Yeah, in the last 2 fiscal years, we put a significant investment forward to housing Whitefish to get them off the ground, and we're participating this year with them again on all of their outreach efforts, the same contribution. And for the budget for this coming fiscal year, we intend to continue that. The only thing is we can't use public budget for it because there are sideboards around what we can do, and housing just is a stretch too far, I think, for the public budget at this time. So that's one of the reasons that we have a private budget, is so we can do things that aren't allowed in bed tax. Okay. And that's a primary one. That's a very big piece of our budget going forward.
Do you mind me asking what percent of the private budget is going towards housing initiatives? And
I don't know the
dollar
percent, but it was $75,000 last year and $75,000 this current year.
Great. I think that's important for the public to know.
And I could probably do the math to tell you the percentage.
That's okay. Quite all right. That's all I had for now. I'll turn it back to the council. Who has questions for Rhonda? Rebecca.
Thank you, Rhonda. You know, one of the questions we hear over and over again is about the 1% voluntary tax. So is there a nutshell thing that you could tell the public about that? I thought you did a great job at explaining what the CVB is on a statewide level as well. But can you just do a quick overview of that?
Well, the Community Sustainability Fund is 1%, and it's voluntary. It's voluntary on the part of businesses. We don't require all businesses to collect it. And it's voluntary on the part of a customer. If they refuse it, we take it off of their guest receipt. And we use that, that's our private funds. That's what we use for housing, for instance, and many of these other programs. And we have an ongoing effort to continue to try to educate the community on what that is, because as staff changes, frontline staff, it's really hard to keep training new people about it, but we feel that it's an incredibly important thing, and our businesses all believe that it's a very powerful tool, and they're committed to it. The difference is ours is voluntary. Statewide, other communities, and I think there are over 20 or 22 tourism business improvement districts, that's a tax. You don't get to say. Every business collects it, and then it's controlled by those businesses, and they're looking at their bottom line. And that's the difference between how we fund our organization and how other communities fund theirs.
Thank you for
Sure.
for that, and then also for approving $75,000 again for Housing Whitefish. Are you using it again to support a new director, an executive director, or is it at their discretion?
No. Originally, it was for a grant writer before they were up and running. We wanted to sort of seed it to help them to generate funds to get the organization up and running. And so we funded a grant writer, but that didn't really come to fruition. And so it became funding to bring on an executive director and for some organization just getting going. That was the last fiscal year, and now this fiscal year, it will be for some of those same purposes, and then also a big campaign to get the public on board that's being developed right now. And then for the next year, we'll look at what their needs are, but we will approve what it will do. Because we have certain areas that are our wheelhouse, our expertise, marketing, messaging, and we want to help with the things that we're super effective with.
Thank you. And for the public, Housing Whitefish is the part of, they branched off from the Whitefish Housing Authority, and they actually are doing fundraising now to generate housing in Whitefish through a 501c3 through the Whitefish Community Foundation. So there'll be a kickoff campaign in May for that. And then the last thing is there's a discrepancy between how many licensed short-term rentals we have in Whitefish, which is less than 400, and what you're showing on the Airbnb data. But the Airbnb data, we cannot get exact addresses, right? It's just a composite number that you get from them.
Yeah.
Right.
In Whitefish, for instance, the number is 534.
Okay, I just keep looking at compliance issues, but we have a gap.
Right.
There.
So the gap is 534 in the city limits at 2.3 rooms. So 534 is multiplied by 2.3 because a hotel guest room is a room. And so a 2.3 guest room short-term rental has average 6 people in it. And so when town's really busy in July,
Thank you all for all the hard work you're doing. I love the marketing. Thank you.
Further questions for Rhonda? Giuseppe.
Well, first of all, welcome on board. Did you find home yet? That was just a provocative joke. You're coming from Chicago, right? Welcome. Thank you, board. Thank you for working, volunteers. I have no idea what volunteering means, so I really appreciate what you're doing. Rhonda and team, last year's budget that we approved here was for a $250,000 round, $250,000. Am I correct? How did we do? Did we make those 250? Did we have to spend less than that budget? How did we do?
we budgeted for this coming year flat to what we actually received last year. So we made the budget, but we didn't increase very much. The growth in traditional there is not much growth.
So
So looking forward to next year, we're budgeting flat.
So when we approved last year $250,000 budget, am I understanding correct that we received $267,000? Hence, this year we're budgeting $267,000?
We're projecting that we're going to end up receiving 267. See, there's a delay. So this is FY24, but we have to start very early. FY24 doesn't start till July. So we're still in FY23. So we use FY22, and then we kind of massage it a little bit and extrapolate. But we are pretty sure that the budget we had last year will come in, that we will cover our budget, and then and a little bit extra, and then we will. So we projected a budget number for next year.
Based on lodging occupancy projections.
Understood.
And trends and all kinds of things.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yes.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve?
Hi, Rhonda. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you to all of you who serve and welcome. My question is around the destination marketing goals, because I understand the support of sustainable tourism, and I think, you know, many of us who've lived here for long enough have felt the pinch of that maybe this isn't sustainable anymore, but I still see this as a goal. This is on page 56 of the packet. The goal is to raise awareness of Whitefish as a travel destination and drive visitation during the non-peak seasons. Is that really still a goal of the CVB with this public money that we're getting?
It is, because businesses to operate year-round and employ people year-round kind of need some customers year-round. And in fact, we have very, very radical swings in business. And summer is much too high and has gotten higher the last number of years. But the shoulders are quite low, and winter is not as strong as it could be. And so we continue to focus on those, because for a sustainable business, if we could have the same amount of business every month and not have that huge peak and keep our businesses healthy, that would be our desired goal.
Okay. So my question is more of how do we explain that to the people who feel like that we have spent enough money marketing Whitefish that that why are we still spending public money on getting more people here in the off seasons, quote unquote off seasons, because it hasn't felt like we've had an off season, although this year feels a little different.
Yeah, I think the COVID years were weird, and I don't think we can really even use them as what is going to happen going forward. Certainly this year seems much more like all the other years. And I know that occupancy, for instance, in hotels, which is an easy way to gauge if there are people in town, is quite low in many months of the year. And it's one of the lowest occupancies of the major communities in Montana. We just have this huge snake that swallowed a pig in July and August.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Frank? And Ben, any questions? Andy, questions? With that, I would entertain a motion to adopt the CVB FY24 annual plan and public portion of the budget.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve and appropriate and approve the Whitefish Convention and Visitor Bureau's marketing plan and budgeting for fiscal year 24 with respect to their public funds.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Further discussion? Very nice presentation. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see such a great showing from the board, as you do every year. So with that said, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for your service.
Of course. Thanks. Thank you all. We'll move on to item 4, communications from the public. We have 2 public hearings advertised for this evening, so if you're here for those hearings, please wait until I call those items. Otherwise, if you have anything to present to the City Council, now would be your opportunity. John, name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. John Phelps. I live at 615 Monaghan Road. I am here as a volunteer for the Bike Ped Committee. I retired from the Bike Ped Committee in December, but I found I couldn't let go of it, and so I went back and asked if they would give me some finite projects to work on, and so that's why I'm here. I wanted to come talk to you about a savings account for the Riverbend construction project. Right now, there's nothing budgeted other than, I think, $100,000 that was budgeted to help hire engineers and get going. And your engineers are working, and they're going to come up with a design, and they're going to come up with a cost estimate. But beyond that, there's just no funds allocated. We don't know at this point what it'll cost. The engineers are going to tell us that, but the number that's been thrown around is at least $1 million. So that's all we're working with, and that's very vague, but it's expensive.
For
For the construction of the Riverbend.
construction, thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That would include all the way through
Thought you
construction
were
and
referring to just
completion.
engineering fees. I was a little-
Yeah, that's construction. And the timing is important. The project has to be constructed when the water's low in the fall. We can't possibly do anything this next fall of '23, but theoretically, the city could be building something in the fall of '24. And in order to do that, a substantial amount would need to be saved. I've talked with Dana and spent some time learning about what might be available, and according to her, in this coming budget year, the resort tax and the general fund are really the only amounts of money available. The resort tax is, 5% of the total resort tax goes to parks and for park capital improvements and bike paths, but that's a relatively small amount. And according to Dana, your general fund reserves are strong, and that could be considered a source of money to set aside as a savings toward the eventual construction. And since we're looking at least 2 fiscal years before the city could possibly break ground, that would give you 2 years, to save. The Resort Tax Committee would like to suggest that you try to set aside $500,000 of general fund money in this upcoming budget year. And because it's general fund dollars, you simply would designate them and they'd remain in the general fund. And if it turned out you needed those for some other emergency or some more important project, they would be there. Now, Dana has to be the one to tell you if that amount's available or some lesser amounts available. But if you were able to set aside $500,000 this budget year, the same amount next budget year, that'd be $1 million at the first opportunity when the city might be able to build the thing. So that's why I'm here, simply in your deliberations as you're working on the budget. If you can find that amount or some lesser amount, anything you can set aside will at least enable us to build it someday. It would be great, and we would all be disappointed, I guess, if the day came to build and the money wasn't there and we had to wait another fiscal year and another fiscal year to finally build up enough to construct the thing. So hopefully the money and the construction timing will work out together. But that's all I had to say, and thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Good to see you. Further communications from the public? Michelle, anyone online tonight?
Anthony, if you'd like to speak towards anything that is not a public hearing, please go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Nothing from me.
Thank you. I think we're good.
Thanks, Michelle. Stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports this evening? How about the council? Andy?
Marina's not here tonight. LLAC committee did meet for our quarterly meeting last Monday. Nothing was, Steve's looking at me like I forgot. Anyway, nothing of huge import came out of that. We went through our usual things that we do, work plan for 2023, updates on various projects and that kind of thing. Of most concern probably to the council is the commercial policy for the Haskell management plan. Went through a little further review on that. Documents are being drafted and will hopefully be done here in the next month or so. There's quite a bit of things that have to go into that, and then we'll look at that probably for our second quarter meeting in June and have an idea if we'll make a decision if we're ready for that or not. So that's it.
Thanks, Andy. Further reports? Not seeing any. We'll go on to the consent agenda. You have the March 20th regular meeting minutes enclosed in the packet. Any comments, or can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve the minutes or approve the consent agenda, excuse me.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? Sure. Most likely, yeah, I think that would be prudent. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. May the record reflect that Councilor Norton recused herself from the vote. We'll move on to item 7A, consideration of a request from Pheasant Run LLC for a preliminary plat to develop a 24-lot subdivision on an unaddressed lot to the northwest of Pheasant Run and west of Highway 93 South. And this is on page 118 of your packet. Wendy, good evening.
All right, good evening. So again, the applicant is proposing a 24-lot subdivision on a little more than 7 acres. The property will be accessed off of Highway 93 South via Pheasant Run, and then a newly constructed extension of Baker Avenue. The subdivision will be bisected with this new north-south Baker Avenue public right-of-way. On the west side of Baker Avenue, the applicant is proposing 21 residential lots with a WR2 zoning and a new looped public right-of-way. The lots on the western portion range in size from around 6,000 square feet to over 13,000. 19 of the lots are sized to accommodate either single-family or two-family dwelling units. The net density is 5.6 to 10.7, depending on if they do all single-family or some duplex. In addition, they're proposing a 10,800 square foot HOA park in the southeast corner of the residential portion of the development. On the east side of Baker Avenue, the applicant is proposing 3 lots in the WB2 with access onto Baker Avenue. In addition, a 30-foot wide right-of-way is proposed in the northeast portion of the development that would connect to Acres Lane. Acres Lane is a private easement that serves the Army Navy, that hotel behind, and then the lot behind that was going to be mini storage units. There are no subdivision variance requested, so this project is eligible for the expedited review, so there is no planning board recommendation accompanying this request. Again, the property is located kind of to the northwest of Whitefish Crossing. The property is undeveloped and has split zoning with the WB2 and the WR2. It is surrounded by commercial and residential uses and is served by all public services and facilities. This project was originally slated to go to planning board, but then they took it back, did some revisions, and so we did a couple of public notices. But the most recent public notice, we did notice the neighbors in March and put a legal notice in the paper, and we didn't receive any public comments. We review subdivisions according to the criteria in the subdivision regulations and state law. Under health and safety, the fire marshal did review the project for conformance to the standards. They have access with public rights-of-way, and hydrants will be located in the project. The property is located in the wildland-urban interface, as all of town is. It's heavily forested, but many of the trees and existing vegetation will be cleared for the rights-of-way and for the proposed buildings. We do have recommended a condition of approval that the applicant provide a tree preservation plan along with a plan to identify which trees are healthy enough to be saved during construction. We also ask that open spaces be properly mitigated for wildland fire protection and maintained yearly. And we'd put our 2 normal notes on the face of the plat regarding the wildland-urban interface. Access to the lots will be off a newly constructed public street. There's going to be no direct public access for the residential lots onto Baker Avenue, but the commercial lots will front off of Baker. The applicant is also proposing a public right-of-way to the northeast for a future connection to Acres Lane. Again, Acres Lane is a private easement that's providing access to 3 commercial lots, so they'll need to secure legal access to this easement and will need to make some improvements to that road. The applicant completed a TIS, and that's included in your packet. At full build-out, the subdivision would generate 440 daily vehicular trips per day. 60% of those trips will travel north and the 40% will travel south. As part of the project, they will be completing almost 500 feet of the Baker Avenue extension. This connection has long been, planned through all of our different transportation plans for this part of the community, along with the 2007 growth policy, the 2021 highway corridor plan. There is additional 500 feet of right-of-way to the south of this project that hasn't been improved yet. The TIS notes that the project is not going to create additional capacity issues, whether the project is built or not. The intersection at Pheasant Run will have a level of service F with or without the project at full build-out, albeit with additional delay. And then once Baker Avenue gets completed, of course, that would help with circulation on this side of the highway. Again, that northeast corner of the project, the applicant is proposing to dedicate a 30-foot wide public right-of-way. The partially improved 30-foot, there's a 30-foot easement that's showing for Acres Lane. So when that subdivision was originally approved, I think originally it was the hotel, and then they added the lot in the front for the Army Navy and then the one in the back. The condition stated that once the additional 30 feet of right-of-way is obtained to the north of Acres Lane, which provides access to the strip mall that has the eye doctor and I think some other businesses there, and there's a hotel and then the RV park. When that was dedicated, that we would ask for dedication of this Acres Lane. That has not happened, so there's still two separate easements. And the Acres Lane currently is only improved through the hotel lot. That third lot to the west is not improved at this point. So we are recommending a condition of approval to connect that access at this time and improve the easement for public access. The applicant is also proposing to pay a fee towards the increase in traffic at the intersection for a future signal of Acres Lane and Highway 93 South. This is the condition that we also added for projects on the east side of Highway 93 South, where they paid their fair share of a future light. So we would recommend a condition of approval that the engineer work with the Public Works Department to determine the percentage of increase in the traffic attributable to that project, and then pay their fair share at the time of final plat. That fund, those monies will be held in a fund until such time as MDT is prepared to put in a light at that spot. There's no map crucial wildlife habitat. However, it's very likely that deer and other animals travel through the wooded property, just like they do all through town. The preservation of the trees will help maintain some of these patterns so they can continue to move through the subdivision. We did notify Fish, Wildlife, and Parks of this project, and we did not receive any comments. There's no high groundwater, the site's nearly flat, there's no stormwater conveyances or wetlands or streams. For drainage, the applicant is proposing to drain stormwater to the southeast corner of the development in an underground facility in the Homeowners Association Park. And of course, those plans will be reviewed and approved after the project is approved here, and they'll go through the regular engineering review. City water and sewer are both located in Baker Avenue. Those will be extended up Baker Avenue and looped through the project. We've already talked about streets. All the streets are going to be built to all the regular city standards with sidewalks, street trees, street lights, and all that good stuff. On the local access street, the loop road, they'll have the option of paying a fee in lieu of installing the street tree. And then once the home is constructed and someone's living there, then the Parks Department goes out and plants the tree, and then the tree can be survived a little bit better than if it's nobody there. Again, for parkland, they are proposing to have a homeowners association park that's a little more than 10,000 square feet. Their obligation is 17,000, so they're proposing to pay a fee in lieu of parkland for that difference, which works well for us. The growth policy identifies the parcel split between general commercial and urban, and so that's why it was zoned WB2 and the WR2, which complies with the growth policy designation. This area is within the Highway 93 South Corridor Plan. It meets all the goals and policies that are in that plan. There was one objective that talks about discouraging projects along Highway 93 South that do not have direct access to a controlled intersection until a raised median has been installed. Just to address that matter, The city doesn't have control over when MDT might install those medians, and there are not signals where this project's going to come out. However, corridor plans, like all growth policies, they are not regulatory documents. The project does comply with the WB2 and the WR2, so staff is recommending approval of the project subject to 20 conditions of approval. A lot of them are the standard conditions, tree preservation plan, as mentioned earlier. Condition 9 has a typo that I'm hoping you can fix. It says northwest and it should be northeast, that we want to see a 30-foot right-of-way dedicated in the northeast corner of the subdivision at the time of final plat, and constructed in compliance with engineering standards. The remainder of acres lane easement must be updated to allow full access, full public access, and upgraded for two-way traffic meeting the city's engineering standards. We want Baker Avenue extension completed to the north property line with an acceptable intersection at Pheasant Run and Baker Avenue with full frontage improvements. We ask that they pay a fee in lieu of signal installation at the intersection of Acres Lane and Highway 93 South for the percentage increase in traffic attributable to this project. We'd like to see on the east side, those commercial lots, that at least 2 of the lots have a shared driveway, so we don't have driveway coming out onto Baker Avenue, because it's going to be a busy road when it gets constructed. And then pay a fee in lieu of parkland dedication for the difference between the dedicated homeowners association park and the final parkland dedication requirement. And I think that's about it. Is there any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on this item? Rebecca, then Ben.
So Wendy, do we have a picture where you could put it up to show us how Baker is gonna attach? And the other thing I was wondering is I couldn't really tell, this won't go all the way to Park Knoll, right?
Correct. If you look at page 126 of your packet,
Okay.
and this is the map right out of the Highway 93 South Corridor Plan.
Sorry. Michelle, is it possible to put that up or not?
I can, it'll just take me a moment.
Okay. You'll be faster than me, I think. Oh, okay.
So the square kind of to the left of the B, because this was area B of the Highway 93 South Corridor, is where this subdivision is located. So it's just sort of right in the middle there. So we have a little bit of right-of-way to the south. This would be the next little section. So on page 125, there's also kind of a red square around the project area, and you can see to the south, there's like a little finger of Baker Avenue extension to the south there.
So how long do you think it will be before this is finally done?
I mean, it's as development comes forward where we can get right away from folks as projects come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben?
Yeah, I just had one question. So to make sure I understand correctly, the Acres Lane is not getting connected. It's just being reserved for the time being.
No, Acres Lane is an existing private easement that serves the Army, Navy, the hotel, which I cannot remember the name, sorry. And then there's a lot behind it, which was a mini storage that came before you last year, I think.
Yeah.
It serves those 3 lots. So it's paved, you know, past the Army, Navy, up past the hotel, and then it ends right there. They'll have to extend that through that 3rd lot where the mini storage units are going to go, and then through their development as well.
Gotcha. In Acres Lane, I've always found that double driveway situation on Acres Lane to be very awkward at best.
Sorry. Hold on one moment.
We're echoing.
What is the long-term plan to address Acres Lane, and how does that come about?
Well, you know, in 2006, like I mentioned, this Acres Lane, or the Acres subdivision came before the council, and they said at the time that we can get 30 feet to the north, because there was only 30 feet for that Acres subdivision, then we'd ask that you dedicate your easement, and we'll get the one to the north, and then that intersection can be improved. But they'll have to work with MDT as part of their project, because they're accessing out through that direction.
So whenever a development comes forward to the north, we will attempt to get more right-of-way for Acres Lane at that time.
Correct.
And then who would pay for the construction of this street?
Well,
to
as
city
development
standards?
takes place, it's the developer who makes the improvements.
Okay,
There's going to have to be some sort of interim fix, I would suspect, at that intersection.
yeah. Are we okay continuing to have additional development in this area without bringing the road up to city standards?
Acres Lane or the
Yeah,
Pheasant Run?
Acres Lane is what I'm talking about.
And maybe Karn could talk about this, but I think there's enough room for two-way, it's 30 feet, you know, at most.
Yeah, that we're picturing a 24-foot local street, back a curb to back a curb, for two-way traffic within that 30 feet.
Okay.
That would meet our city standards.
It's not ideal, it's kind of a transition.
Right, I mean, it's not going to meet all of our standards for sidewalks and boulevards and all that, but for just the two-way travel, they should be able to design the road.
And then the Highway 93 access, which is probably the worst part of it. What?
Yeah, that's something, they'll need to take a look at that, and then, of course, we'll need to work with MDT if they're going to be changing that approach, and work with MDT on what's acceptable to the highway department.
And but that's not in the scope of what's happening here with this project?
No, it
That's-
would be in the
It would
scope.
be,
It will be.
yeah. When you access a highway or you make changes to a highway, you have to get a permit from MDT.
Okay, great.
And I would just point out too, and I probably didn't make that very clear here, the reason that they have to have the access through Acres Lane and Pheasant Run is the number of units and the length. So if they just accessed off of Pheasant Run, it's got too many units and it's too far in to not have a second access. So if they propose to access off of a New Baker, maybe they can figure out how to extend that to the north through the Hamilton project. That would be suitable as well. So either access works, but their proposal here is to use Acres Lane.
Thanks, Ben. Further questions for Wendy? Giuseppe?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. Maybe Dana or Laney can come to help you. I have a question here about impact fees. Are the impact fees going to be assessed as development comes? So it's too early to talk about impact fees right now,
Right.
correct?
Correct. Those come at time of building permit.
Perfect. Now, the city, with our committee, is looking at putting transportation impact fees into the package. If we do so, are we going to assess the cost for the traffic signal and all of that as a double impact? You understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I understand. It would have to be something that we take into account all funds that we've collected already for that traffic signal when we actually calculate what the impact fee cost is. So you would credit any funds that we've had for that signal already. How that will work through, we'd have to work with our consultants on that, but there would be ways to account for it.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Further questions for Wendy? Rebecca?
Wendy, I guess I was thinking that if we were going to put a light down there, we would have it at Park Knoll, even though it's a private road. Are you saying that if we put a light up, it would be at Pheasant Run then?
No, we've been looking at a light at Acres and Highway 93, and we've already collected money from projects on the east side. And Acres Lane, as I understand it, maybe Karin could correct me, was a good distance from the next light and would be a good distance to Park Knoll if one ever happened at Park Knoll.
We could actually put one at Acres Lane.
I think the traffic engineers have looked at it and thought that was a suitable location. And we're collecting money for it, so.
And that's what's shown in our transportation
Oh,
plan,
thanks.
is that Acres Lane.
Thank you. That makes me feel a lot better.
Frank?
Wendy, this is the first first development that I've seen come through on this expedited basis or review. Am I missing something, or is this in fact the
This
first
is the
one?
third one.
Third one?
We had a project behind kind of where the old Montana Shirt Company building was on Baker Avenue.
Oh, so this has been, okay, I
And then
remember
the
that.
project kind of around the Dalen Dental down to the
Yeah,
Highway 93. So
okay.
this is the third one.
Third one, okay, thank you.
Further questions?
It was so quick.
Yeah. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 7C of our agenda. We'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony on this item? Sir?
Good evening. My name is Kurt Vickman, and I'm the owner of the property in Pheasant Run. After purchasing the 7 acres in February of 2022, we worked with the city and the Park Knoll neighborhood to annex this property into the city and then rezone it WR2 and WB2 on the east. And tonight we're asking for the council's approval for this 24-lot subdivision. On the west side of the property, we're proposing 21 lots within the WR2 zoning district, with lots number 4, 5, 6, and 7 being restricted to single-family use, along with a 25-foot setback along the entire west side of the property per our agreement with the Park Knoll neighborhood as outlined in the May 16th, 2022 City Council meeting notes. The remaining 17 lots then would be used for either single-family or 2-family units. On the east side, we're proposing 3 lots in the WB2 zoning district with access onto Baker Avenue. Our application complies with all zoning and subdivision regulations, as well as the growth policy and the Highway 93 corridor plan, so we're not asking for any variances at this time. The application also has the support of the Park Knoll neighborhood, who we're committed to and have been in communication with throughout this development process. Especially, we want to continue to work with them when it comes to the tree preservation plan, which we've heard from them, which is an important part of kind of maintaining a sense of feel in that neighborhood as well. And so we want to continue to do that. I've also read through the staff report and the conditions of approval, and I'm in agreement and support of those as well. So that's all I have. Thank you for your
Thanks,
time.
Kurt.
Yep.
Thanks for coming tonight. Further public comments? Michelle, anyone online wishing to comment?
For those of you online, if you'd like to speak towards this agenda item, please unmute your mic and state your name and address, please. I think we're good.
Great. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. I saw Giuseppe's hand
Yes,
first.
Mr. Mayor, I move. We've been recommended all the time. I move to approve the canopy subdivision as submitted by the applicant, subject to the conditions as listed in the report.
Does that include the edit to condition number 9, changing northeast from northwest to northeast?
Thank you for reminding me the amended typo
Okay.
in the report.
Thank
Yes.
you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion?
I just want to say, long time no see, Kurt. Good job in following through, and I think I see your neighbors there, and they're nodding, so we're all going to be friends, so good job.
Thanks, Giuseppe. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle. We'll move on to item 7B of our agenda, which is ordinance 23-4, rezoning approximately 9.9 acres of land located at 625 Lund Lane, known as Parcel B of COS number 1419, in Section 1, Township 30 North, Range 22 West, Flathead County, Montana, from County R3 one-family residential district to WR1 one-family residential, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone on a first reading. Good evening, I should say, not afternoon.
Good evening. As you said, the city is requesting a zoning map amendment for 625 Lund Lane. It's 9.9 acres Currently, it's zoned County R3, and we'd be zoning it to WR1, which is the equivalent zone. And then the growth policy designated the area as rural residential. And then the Whitefish Planning Board on March 16th, 2023, made a motion to approve the zone change unanimously and recommends approval. So again, the purpose of the rezone is the property was recently annexed into the city and now must be rezoned from county to city zoning, and the city equivalent to R3 is WR1, which is a local policy and a state law. So the property is currently vacant and is surrounded by R3 zoning and single-family use as well. The notice is mailed to neighbors in March, and a notice was put in the paper, and I have not received any comment at the time of report or after. So to review the findings of fact, A, made in accordance with the growth policy. The future land use map designates areas rural residential, which would be consistent with WCR, but since WR1 is the closest equivalent zoning to the county R3, that's what the city policy and state law dictates we annex consistent to that zoning. So finding one, the proposed zone change to WR1 is in accordance with the growth policy because the proposed zoning district is the equivalent of the existing county zoning per city policy. Secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers. The proposed zone change will secure all of that as city zoning and other standards will be reviewed at the time of development. C, promote health, safety, and welfare. It promotes general health, safety, and welfare as the property is included in the city's extension of services plan. Facilitate the adequate provision of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. This will be adequate as the property is now located inside city limits and is in the extension of services plan and can be served by public services and utilities. Reasonable provision of adequate light and air. Again, all zoning, setbacks, building code requirements will be met at time of development to ensure provision of adequate light and air. The effect of motorized and non-motorized transportation systems. Lund Lane is a private road easement, and so again, the zone change will not affect motorized and non-motorized transportation, and any future impacts will be reviewed during the permitting process. Promotion with compatible urban growth. It's compatible as the surrounding area is all R1. Consideration of the character of the district and the particular suitability of the particular uses. Again, the surrounding neighborhood is zoned county R3 single family, which is what we are zoning the equivalent to. Conserving the value of buildings. Again, there won't be any impact to the value of surrounding buildings as there's no significant change in land use. And encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout the jurisdictional area. It encourages the most appropriate use of land because it is consistent, again, with the adjacent county zoning. And the historical use and established use patterns, recent changes in use trends will be weighed equally, and consideration will not be given to the exclusion of the other. The proposed zone change is consistent with historical established and trending use patterns, which include single-family homes in the area. So it was recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board that the City Council adopt Staff Report WZC 23-01 findings of fact and recommend that the zoning map amendment be approved.
Thanks, Nelson. Any questions for Nelson on his staff report? Frank?
Nelson, explain to me Lund Lane. Is that not a private
road?
It is a private, yes, it is a private road in the county currently. It's an
Right.
easement. Mhm.
And so what is the easement access onto Lund Road for this particular property? Is it going to allow for R1 or whatever we're planning to zoning?
Yes, that shouldn't be an issue. So the property is zoned currently R3, and if it is changed to WR1, that won't have any impact, the road won't have any impact on that. Did I understand your question properly?
I think you did. I'm not sure I agree with you. That is a private easement on a private road. My guess is that there's a limitation based on each lot's access to that road as to how much traffic, I'll say, can be delivered onto that road under the circumstances. That's my guess. And so I would like to know whether we've evaluated that or whether that's a condition to ensure that that lot at least will comply, however it's used, with its right or easement across Lund Lane, or do they have other access into the city or onto Cara?
I don't believe, there's no other access to the property this time.
Yeah.
Frank, I mean, that R3 in the county is a 10,000 square foot lot. Our WR1 is a 10,000 square foot lot, so we're not changing the density. They have that private access off of Lund Road. We can't, just with a rezone request, we can't get a public easement or right of way. If they ever subdivide that, then we'd have an opportunity to ask for at least their portion of the road to connect through there. But currently, all they're doing is they wanted either water or sewer, so they annexed into the city, and once they annexed, we had to give them this equivalent zoning.
That brings me to my second question, and this is for Angie as well. Our growth policy calls for this to be essentially rural residential, which would be 2.5 acre to 10 acre lots in there. We have the same issue with another piece of property that wants to annex into the city. It's zoned one way in the county, and we have a different zoning that we would like to put in that, which is inconsistent with that. Is it fair to say that what we're doing here is zoning this to a higher density than our growth policy would otherwise call for?
I mean, yeah, because the future land use map for that area is rural residential. However, all the zoning around there is all in urban density already. So it's all the lots surrounding that, not just this lot, but the ones all surrounding it are urban density. And as you know, these properties start coming into the city through subdivisions like the one we just saw. I mean, we're probably going to have to, when we do our growth policy update, take a look at that and see if that's appropriate area for that. But because it's completely surrounded by county R3, it's not an island in the middle of it that has higher density, but it's every property around it has that same 10 acre or 10,000 square foot lot.
Okay, well, I'm throwing out a little bit rhetorical questions, and I understand where we're going with this. We say, and we're supposed to be encouraging the most appropriate use of the land throughout the jurisdictional area. The proposed zone to WR1 would encourage the most appropriate use of land, and it's consistent with the county zoning. It's not, however, consistent with our growth policy, and it's not, however, consistent with how the existing properties are developed. And as far as I know, there's no plans for any of those lots or those acreages along that line to be developed for higher density. So I think I question some of that. And then the last question I've got, we've got finding 11, proposed zone change is consistent with the historical, established, and trending use patterns of the area, which include single-family homes. Well, it's not. That entire area is all large multi-acre lots. And so this would be a dramatic change to all of the land use surrounding it. So I'm pointing out some obvious things here that may not be obvious to folks that don't live out there. I'm not saying this is not the appropriate thing to be done in there, but I don't think these make any sense in terms of the actual use of the surrounding properties and how those existing properties are developed and have developed over the past 20 to 30 years.
I guess, Frank, I would just say that really demonstrates why we're overhauling our growth policy. I mean, I think those are all very good points. But again, I think that just, underscores the need that we take a look at our growth policy, which is, 15 years old or something?
Correct.
And determine what is appropriate growth. And part of that, undertaking that growth policy revision, will be looking at the existing uses as they are now. So again, I see your point, but again, I think it just really has to do, could we zone them something different? We could. We can. But again, it's been our policy not to downzone. It doesn't mean we can't do that.
And also directly across Lund Lane, I mean, all those lots along there, all the way out to Caro Avenue, are all quarter acre to half acre side. I mean, basically fit in with that R3 zoning of the county.
Thanks, Dave.
Further questions for Wendy on her staff, Nelson on his staff report? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 7B of our agenda, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony on this item? Michelle, anyone online? With that said, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Giuseppe?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve WZC 23-01 and adopt the findings of fact in the staff report as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board on March 16, 2023.
Is there a second to the motion?
Should the motion be adopt ordinance 23-04 and not WZC?
I would like reference to the ordinance number as well, please. Okay. It's 23-4.
Ordinance 23-4.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? Nelson, thank you for the staff report and presentation. Appreciate it. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to item 8. Chief, welcome this evening. We are going to contemplate the award of a contract with Northern Rockies Fire for a new fire engine in the amount of $693,214. Chief Page.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
And City Council. As you know, the fire department provides fire, rescue, hazmat, and EMS services to the city of Whitefish, the Whitefish Fire Service Area, and portions of the Flathead Fire Service Area. A fire engine needs to be capable of supporting the department's all-hazard mission. Equipped with large fire pump, water, ladders, hose, and various tools and equipment, fire engines are the department's primary response vehicles. The fire department's fleet consists of 3 engines. Our newest is the first due that we respond with, followed by our second due and a reserve engine when one of the other engines is out of service. Our vehicle replacement plan looks to replace an engine every 8 years, with the oldest sold at auction and replaced at 24 years old. The National Fire Protection Association recommends that fire apparatus greater than 15 years old be placed in reserve status and removed from fire service at 25 years old. Our plan replacing engines every 8 years will put us close to meeting the NFPA recommendations. Our current fleet of fire engines includes a 2014, which is actually 9 years old, a 1997 26-year-old, and a 1995 28-year-old engine. In order to address our aging fleet, a specification was created for a new all-wheel drive fire engine. A bid request was published in the Whitefish Pilot on January 25th, February 8th, plus in the Daily Interlake on January 29th and February 12th. Bid submittals were due February 23rd and opened at 3 p.m. There were 4 submittals received which were reviewed by myself against the specification. Northern Rockies Fire out of Kalispell, Montana, bidded a HME Aaron's Fox engine, was the lowest bidder at $693,214, and was also the quickest build time at 400 days from signed order. The fire department's FY23 budget had estimated a $450,000 appropriation for a new engine. The $450,000 was also took into account $100,000 from the Whitefish Fire Service Area. With the entire industry continuing to see huge price jumps and longer bid times, it comes to no surprise that the lowest bid price of $693,214 far exceeded the budget by $243,214. As a one-time capital purchase, the additional cost of $243,214 is recommended to be paid for by the reserves in the Fire and Ambulance Fund, which are at an all-time high due to the CARES funding received during the pandemic. The FY23 budget before this purchase assumes an ending fund balance of $1,521,239 at year end. If approved, the budget amendment would likely be needed to be made later this year. Staff respectfully recommends that the City Council award a contract to the lowest responsible bidder, Northern Rockies Fire of Kalispell, Montana, to provide a fire and engine specified for $693,214.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief on his staff report? Frank?
Chief, I know how you bid for this thing, or you published for the bids. My question is, did we send requests for bids outside of the valley? I mean, these are obviously national manufacturers. I mean, did we look elsewhere besides within the valley?
Yes, we sent out to the 6 major apparatus manufacturers. Now, this representative is in Kalispell. The truck is actually going to be built in Wisconsin.
Okay. So I just want to say that we reached out outside the valley as well as.
Yes.
Okay.
Ben?
I was wondering if you have any more insight you can offer on why the cost of this truck so vastly exceeds our budget.
The prices have all been going up and the lead times, and probably my optimistic estimation a couple of years ago at $450. But the highest bid we got on this was 1.2 with a 3-year build. So the industry is going nuts.
Is this a price bubble or something? Like, is there any sense in waiting to see how this changes over time?
Given the 3-year build-outs that we're seeing, this is going to be too long to wait to purchase. And it's not just fire apparatus. I was talking to like Republic Services or Kalispell, who has garbage trucks. Those have also gone up to around $800,000 that used to be half the price. So I think we have supply chain issues from the pandemic that have still occurred. And then I think a lot of spending was deferred for municipalities during COVID, not necessarily Montana, but nationwide, who were relying on sales tax. And when the relief came, they're now able to move forward with purchases. So I think we're seeing a big backlog. And we know that inflation has been an all-time high. So will it come down as inflation comes down? Potentially, but I think it's going to take too many years to meet our needs. We are seeing higher repair and maintenance costs for our fleet in the fire department. So by replacing our oldest engine, we should be able to see lower costs for repair and maintenance.
Further questions? Giuseppe and then Steve?
Mine is more of a comment for your benefit. At the airport, we're looking at trucks that cost $1 million and they're 9 months out, and we're looking nationwide. So I'm not surprised. Actually, I'm surprised that we're finding it so cheap. Must be yours is red, mine is yellow.
Right.
Yeah.
Steve?
I just have a question about the budget impact for Dana. What does this do effectively to that fund?
So right now, at year end for fiscal year 23, we're estimating about $1.5 million in fund balance. We had a significant amount of funds that came in through the CARES Act. Spending down that fund balance one time for a capital purchase like this would be appropriate. It's not an ongoing cost, although a replacement schedule is. We'll get into that later on as we look to doing a voted levy at some point for apparatus for the fire department. But right now, I'm comfortable with the $243,000 that would come off.
Okay. And what else would that fund balance be spent on is I guess my bigger question.
Supplies, personnel, and equipment for the fire. It is restricted to the fire and ambulance.
Okay, so our So paying for personnel and all that stuff comes out of that fund balance as well?
Yes, but generally with personnel, you're looking at paying that with like ongoing revenue so that you pay for that every year. Fund balance is really like your reserves that you need or for one-time capital. The reason we ended up with 1.5 million was because the wages for firefighters and EMS providers were paid for through the CARES funding for a full year. And so we didn't actually have to use our ongoing revenue that we normally generated for those personnel costs. So that is a one-time bump in that fund. I don't see that happening in the future.
But I mean, it just seems like 1.2 million is kind of a lot to have in reserves, or am I wrong about that, for one fund?
For one fund, you know, their wages are the highest, probably one fund of wages in the city. I want to say they're probably close to 3 million a year. So the reserves are not at the maximum allowed amount by state law, which is 50% of your annual appropriation. So it's high. It's reasonable to spend it down on a piece of equipment instead of financing this and having to pay interest.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? I know we did talk about this fairly extensively, or continuing to, during our Fire and EMS Long-Term Strategic Plan Committee meetings, and one of the topics we have discussed is deferred capital purchases and getting our equipment on a more regular replacement plan. And when I look at the average age of the 3 engines being 22 years, and I'm driving a vehicle, if I was driving a vehicle that was 22 years and I'm not even responding to emergencies, I'd certainly be concerned as well. So I think this is a very simple decision we need to make here tonight. With that said, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to award the contract with Northern Rockies Fire for a fire engine in the amount of $693,214.
Thank you, Steve.
And I'll second it.
And that was seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion?
Yes, I think at that price, Bridger, we should look for a little helicopter for the police department.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
You have Dana's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for our city manager? Not seeing any. Dana, anything additional to report on?
Well, if you'd like a brief legislative update, or not, because it's been fun. Tomorrow is transmittal date for all revenue bills. What that means is all the bills that we've had that are related to revenues, you know, taxes, et cetera, they have to be transmitted to the other chamber by the end of the day tomorrow. Then they will go on a break for the Easter holiday and then come back and start working on bills again. It was probably one of the most chaotic past 2 weeks trying to keep up with hearings and all the bills that were flying back and forth. There's good news and there's bad news with the legislative session, obviously. One of the requests in my manager's report is to look at moving the preliminary budget deadline of May 1st to May 15th. And the reasoning there is that the session is not over until May 5th. And so with that, being able to know how some of these revenue bills might affect the city's budget, and not necessarily this coming year's budget, but fiscal year 25, I think we need to be aware of what impacts are coming down just a year away. That is a request that I've asked for you guys to give us the next 2 weeks. What that does is it'll only give you 2 weeks to review it before our first work session, the Tuesday after Memorial Day. But that would give Lainey and I time to assess some of these bills. For example, Senate Bill 511, that bill would limit government or local government property tax increases to 4.75% in any given year. We have worked hard to try to get our carryover mills to be exempt from that. That bill did pass today through second reading. So it is likely going to make it through on its way to the House, so it'll meet transmittal. Some of these other bills, like Senate Bill 519 and 517, those were all tabled and likely dead. Senate Bill 528 related to ADUs, get ready, that one passed through with minor amendments. We'll probably be having ADUs by right everywhere. That's just likely going to happen. Unfortunately,
ADUs are short-term rentals.
ADUs.
Okay.
And short-term rentals. So what we were trying to really push for with Senator Hertz, who has both the ADU bill and the short-term rental bill, was just exempt ADUs from that short-term rental bill. Don't allow them to build a bunch of ADUs and then they turn into short-term rentals, because that's not what we need as a state. That we need housing for workers. And so Senate Bill 268 is still waiting for executive action. That will likely come through. He hasn't been amenable to any amendments that I tried to propose, like, hey, we're a resort community, pull us off out of that. But so those bills are still in progress. Some of the affordable housing tax abatement program, the rent local program, those were all tabled by committee. So they're likely all dead. The House Bill 865, which didn't necessarily affect City of Whitefish because it was for Class 1 cities with a population of 20,000 or more, that was going to actually provide an overall local government expenditure limitation. And that one actually just failed second reading today. So hopefully that doesn't go through. It wouldn't affect us yet, but 20 years down the road, if we hit a Class 1 city status of 20,000 population, it would affect Whitefish. So Kalispell was potentially going to be impacted too. Representative Fern does have House Bill 943 out that's not in my report, and that would actually change the taxable status of a short-term rental from residential to commercial. And I just checked, and that one did pass second reading pretty substantially, actually, in the House. And so hopefully that'll make it through the Senate. That won't really affect our collections necessarily. It's really just reallocating who's paying property tax. So short-term rentals will end up paying a higher tax rate than residential units. How the state is going to work on enforcing that and determining who's a short-term rental, I don't know. We already have enough challenges as we do trying to keep our regulations enforced. And so stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say. The city managers are going to schedule a meeting in early May in Billings, and I'll try to attend to kind of debrief on what happened this legislative session and what all the impacts are. So with that, if you could just give me some direction on if we can move that deadline to May 15th. If we can get it done sooner, then we will.
I'm seeing head nods, thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have this evening.
Thanks very much, Dana. We'll move on to item C. You do have enclosed in Dana's city manager section a request to appoint Daniel Sitter, Cameron Blake, Wendy Compton-Ring, Councilor Davis, and Dana Smith to the rating panel and selection committee. Have a motion, please.
Please move to appoint Daniel Snyder, Cameron Blake, Wendy Compton-Ring, Dana Smith, and Ben Davis to the housing panel, Whitefish Housing.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle, thanks very much. Frank, we'll move on to item 10, consideration of appointing Thomas Shea to the Whitefish Housing Authority as resident commissioner to complete the term ending at the end of this calendar year. Frank.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to appoint Thomas Shea to the Whitefish Housing Authority as resident commissioner to complete the term ending 12/31/23.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Is Thomas here? I thought so. I think we've met before, so thanks for submitting your application. Very much appreciated. Thanks for sticking around tonight. It's good to see you. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign. And that motion does carry unanimously, Michelle, as well. You do have a letter from the Lakes Master HOA Board of Directors. Dana briefly touched on this at the remaining time we had in our work session. It sounds like Craig's on this with an evaluation of the roads through Pacer. Is there any questions for Dana, or can we move on? It's being addressed, and I'm sure we'll get an update from Craig at the next meeting. Consideration of appointment to volunteer boards and committees made during the special session. Just wanted to welcome Daniel Wood to the Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore Protection Committee. He was our only appointment earlier this morning. We will move on to councilor comments. We'll start with Rebecca tonight.
I have a few items. The first one is for Karin. There was a water emergency kind of at Starbucks, and so it had been a water that had been running for 8 hours or so, and so looked on our website and I tried to call Public Works to find our emergency response thing, and there wasn't any. So I called the police, and the police were able to initiate contact with Public Works, and they were able to arrive within 10 minutes. Really nice guy. But so I wanted Karen to just publicly state what we do. So a lot of residents or citizens don't know that we actually do deal with emergencies on the weekend related to our pipe system and stormwater systems, and that we can't always go on private property, but we usually know where the mains are and how to turn things off. And so I just wanted to have that reviewed, because we used to have a place on our website or a specific phone number, and that has changed. So Karen, do you mind addressing that real quickly?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so if there's any sort of a public works issue like what you saw going on today happening, the thing to do is to call the Public Works office, which I think you had called today, Rebecca, and you might not have reached someone right away, but that's the number.
It was yesterday. It was on the weekend.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the number to call, if it's not an emergency, even if it's a weekend, is you can call that Public Works number. But if it's an emergency, then you can call the police department, and we do have our Public Works, there's always someone on call, and they will get in touch with them. So that's if it's an emergency and it's not during the work hours. If it's during work hours, then you can call the Public Works office. But so it sounds like there was, yeah, they had one of the Public Works guys go out there and take care of it this afternoon.
I just wanted the public to know that we don't want water running for
Right.
hours and
Yeah.
days.
Right.
Because in this situation, it was lucky because it went into a stormwater drain catchment, but it could actually harm someone else's property if it kept running or cause erosion. So, okay.
The other thing I was just going to note is that besides those phone numbers, if you also just see various problems around town that you would like to report, you can either call the Public Works number, or you can go on our website. There's something called Problem Reporter, and you'll see the tab at the top right part of the website. So you can go into that tab and report a problem as well. And that will also go to Public Works for getting addressed.
Yep, thank you. I just wanted people to know that they're part of the solution. So if you see dangerous things or something that could be done,
Duly noted.
Yep, okay. And then the other thing that someone had mentioned to me was they miss our newsletters. And so, Dana, do you mind speaking to that, how they can access our online newsletters?
Yeah, so we do post our newsletters on our website now. We actually ran into issues having a printing company be able to print and mail our newsletters. Plus, we felt that we are being climate smart in going electronic. So those are posted twice a year at this point. We are looking at revamping that process, making it more timely since it is online, being more specific, only a couple pages. We're trying to kind of re-envision how we can be more timely in our communications through that. So, but right now you can go online and find our newsletters.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing is, people have been asking me if I'm going to run again for city council. So I just wanted the public to know that I think our deadline is June 15th, June 20th. Okay, opens, when was that?
April 20th.
April 20th and closes June 19th. And so there is a formal process for running for city council if anybody is thinking about it. And so feel free to ask questions. And it's a 4-year term. It's not always fun, but it's interesting. And we do have fun too, but it's you learn a lot. So, anyways, I just wanted to tell anybody that's out there, if you're interested, ask the other counselors how to run, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate the comments. Andy, anything this evening? Giuseppe? Nothing. Steve?
I just want to extend my most sincere apologies to the Whitefish Legacy Lands Advisory Committee for totally not showing up for my meeting last week. I apologize. So
that's why there's two of you.
That's all I've got.
Ben, anything this evening? Frank will be last tonight, I guess.
Nothing.
Frank?
Nothing from me.
I have a few things. I'll try to move quickly. Dana has made a request for our mini budget meetings. I believe 4 out of the 7 of us have responded. If you haven't, please get back to her. These are important meetings as we prepare for the FY24 budget adoption process. If you haven't seen the email, she has slots available April 4th from 4:30 to 5:30, April 5th from 9 to 10 a.m., April 5th from 5 to 6 p.m., and April 10th from 12 to 11. So please reach out to her via email. I think she sent that out today. Secondly, we are going to be going on a tour of the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant in early June as a council. I reached out to Craig and Dana and asked that they give us a tour now that those capital improvement projects have been completed. So looking forward to that. I wanted to give a big shout out to Maria, Carla, Jenny, Michelle, Kenny, and the whole Parks and Rec department. They held the annual statewide Montana Trails Recreation and Park Association meeting this morning, or it's actually all week, at Grouse Mountain Lodge. I attended the morning session and gave a short welcoming address and spoke regarding the Haskell easement project as it ties to recreation in our town. So Maria did a wonderful job. She's the outgoing president of that organization, and they did a lion's share to make that happen for our town, and it was very well received with a couple hundred people joining us statewide. So thanks to the Park and Rec folks this evening. Fourth, actually I'm going to skip that, Dana. I'll talk to you about that tomorrow. You have enough on your plate. Finally, I think that is all I had. I did have just a philosophical comment that I wanted to share, and I didn't share this with the CVB, but it was kind of a follow-up to Steve, your point, and I'm not going to belabor this by any means, but I thought the lodging data that Rhonda presented was extremely compelling and just paints the picture of how damaging STRs and the changes that are going to be made at the state level are going to have on housing in our town. The one philosophical question I have is when we evaluate livability, our barometer for livability always seems to be whether we've met this certain occupancy threshold with our hotels and lodging establishments within town, understanding that a lot of us don't depend on tourism for why we live here. And it's just a philosophical statement that I wanted to ask, and I think I will reach back out to Rhonda because there's certainly other factors we need to look at when we set those thresholds. And to Steve's point, you're spot on. We don't have shoulder seasons anymore. People crave a break from the traffic, the congestion, the pollution, and the ability to go back downtown and shop in our restaurants, shop in our stores. And the comment that, well, that wouldn't happen unless we had visitation occurring during the shoulder seasons as well to keep those businesses viable. I don't really buy that argument to its entirety, because I think there's a lot of people here that miss going downtown and being able to walk in and have a nice dinner at the restaurant without making a reservation 1 week in advance, or shopping at our local stores where it's not crowded and parking's limited. So I'll just close on that note. It's more of a philosophical point, and that's how I feel. On that note, anything further from staff? Anything further from council? Andy?
Just one comment to that, and I thought it was pretty interesting. If we looked at the spending numbers, there was a 61% increase in local spending.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's our shoulder seasons not being there. It's just overall greater population, not just in Whitefish, but in the valley as a whole. And people come to our community because we do have good restaurants, we do have good shopping, we do have entertainment at night, unlike the other communities. And in the valley, so.
But when it's cranking so hard, people stay
Yeah,
home.
so then when we look at 80% occupancy on the rooms, and we've got a 61% increase in local spending.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. It is a double.